Hello, this is Mrs. Poland for lesson 1.01 on conditional relative frequencies. In this video, I'm going to go over example 2 from the practice. So the prompt talks about the Titanic, and the data is from the original information, just simplified, and they provide you with a two-way table with survival status of the passengers and whether the passengers were first, second, or third class. So we have two variables, and they're both categorical: survival status and then class of travel. And so the first thing you need to do is, in this particular contingency table, they don't give you the row and column totals. So you have to calculate them out, and those are called the marginal frequencies. So the number of first class passengers, if you add it together, is 319. The number of second class passengers is 261, and the number of third class passengers is 627. And now we're going to get the marginal frequencies of survival status. So the numbers who survived is, when you add up the row, is 442. And the number that did not survive was 765. And that gives you a grand total of 1,207 passengers. And that's known as your sample size. So, and the problem asks, what proportion of adult passengers? So that's what goes into the denominator. You're talking about the whole sample size, the whole sample. And the number of adult passengers on the Titanic who survived. So in the denominator is the 1207, and the number who survived, now you're going to look at the row total, and 442 survived. And that is, when you look at the proportion, rounded to 3 decimal places, is 366. What percentage of adult passengers? So now we're again looking at the entire sample of 1,207. How many of those were third class and survived? So both conditions had to happen. So third class and survived, that's the 151. So 151 over 1,207 is approximately 0.125. What proportion of survivors were third class? So again, of survivors. So this is actually a conditional probability. You're not looking at all passengers, only those that have survived. So now that means, let me get my highlighter out, you're only looking at the 442 who survived. And that goes in the denominator. How many of them were third class? 151. And if you enter that in the calculator, this is 0.342. What percentage of third class passengers? So now again, this is a condition. I'm not looking at all the passengers. I'm only looking at the third class. So I'm going to take out my blue. So instead of looking at the row, I'm now looking at the column. How many of those survived? 151. And in the denominator is the total of the condition. So there were 627 passengers in third class, and only 151 survived. And when you enter that in the calculator, that's 0.241. Now, the first question was out of all the passengers, and we looked at a whole row. We looked at the row total survival. That's known as a marginal relative frequency. Either when you look at the row total or column total, that's going to be marginal in the margins, the total, not the actual data. Part B is actually called a joint relative frequency because you're looking at the intersection of two categorical variables. And so that's known as joint. The Part C and Part D, you're dealing with condition. You're not looking at all passengers. You're only looking at either a row total or a column total, but only one, a subset of your data, and that's known as a conditional relative frequency. Okay, so that's for Part C and D. And Part E is like example 4, but not exactly. It's similar. You'll see why in a second. So now we want to find the conditional relative frequency of survival status for each class of travel. So the condition is the class of travel. That's what's going to go into the denominator. And that's important because you could find the relative frequency of class for each survival status. But now what we're looking at is the condition of class. So you're looking at first class first. Actually, I need to get the totals in there, don't I? Okay, let me get them in. I'm sorry, I didn't copy them down before. So 319, 261, 627. So again, we're looking at the condition of class, and that's why I'm going down. So, how many of the first class survived? So the condition is first class, and the same thing here. We're only looking at first class. And 197 survived, whereas 122 did not survive. So this, when you enter it in the calculator, is, hold on, I'm looking at the wrong thing, is 0.618. And 122 over 319 is 0.382. Now we're looking, the condition is only looking at second class. Remember, that's another class, either first, second, or third. So now we're looking at second. So in the denominator are the total number of second class passengers. And of those, 94 survived, whereas 167 died. And so that's 0.36, and this is 0.64. Notice how each of these add to 1, the proportions. And now we're going to do third class. So the condition is now third class, and we have 627 passengers, third class passengers rather. 151 survived, or 476 did not survive. And this is approximately 0.241, and this is 0.759. I hope these videos are helpful. Have a great evening.